Imagine this. You wake up in a world where every word you've ever spoken hangs in the air like a ghost. Sentences coil around your wrists, paragraphs anchor your ankles. The insults you hurled in anger gleam like rusted chains. The promises you broke shimmer as fractured glass underfoot. You try to move, but the weight of your own language pins you to the bed. A voice yours, but distorted whispers from the walls. You built this. You chose every word. Now breathe. Look closer. This is not a nightmare. It's your reality. Every day, you sculpt the invisible architecture of your life with a tool so ordinary it's almost vulgar. Your tongue. The words you use to describe your job, your relationships, your past, trapped, broken, hopeless, are not passive reflections. They're incantations. Each syllable a chisel strike against marble, carving the contours of what you'll endure, who you'll become. You've been told language is a mirror. What if it's a hammer? Consider the paradox. You live in an age of unprecedented self-expression. You tweet, post, rant, confess. Yet the more you speak your truth, the more your inner world feels scripted, hollow, as if the phrases you borrow, "I'm fine," "it is what it is," "this is just who I am," aren't yours at all. They're hand-me-downs from a culture that profits from your numbness. You recycle cliches about toxic positivity while secretly envying the coworker who calls her divorce a liberation, the neighbor who labels his bankruptcy a rebirth. Their lives transform. Yours stagnates. Why? Here's the rupture. Your words are not describing reality. They're conducting it. Think of the last time you said, "I'm devastated." Did you mean your soul was razed, your future ash? Or were you merely parroting a script written by influencers and algorithms? Now recall a moment you declared, "I am unstoppable," even if you didn't believe it, especially if you didn't believe it. Did your pulse quicken? Did the room tilt? That's no placebo. That's neurology, philosophy, alchemy. The ancient Sumerians believed naming a thing gave you power over it. The Bible claims God spoke light into existence. Wittgenstein argued, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." Yet you toss phrases like dead-end job and failed marriage into conversations like confetti, oblivious to the funeral you're hosting for your own potential. You've weaponized language against yourself and called it being realistic. But what's real? When a child points to a cloud and says, "Dragon," the cloud becomes scales, wings, fire. When a society labels dissenters terrorists, dissent becomes a crime. When you tell yourself, "I'll never recover from this," your cells listen, cortisol floods, synapses rewire. You become the curator of your own suffering. Yet something primal resists, a voice beneath the voice. It emerges in dreams where you speak in tongues, in rageful sobs when no words suffice, in the eerie power of a stranger's compliment that haunts you for weeks. You sense viscerally that language is not a tool but a covenant, a spellbook left open on the altar of your mind. Who wrote it? When did you agree to its terms? The greater terror is this: if words built your cage, they might also be the key. But to turn the lock, you'll need to confront a truth so destabilizing it liquefies identities. What if depression isn't something you have, but something you do? A ritual of syntax. What if destiny is just the stories you've memorized? What if every time you say, "That's impossible," you're not stating a fact but casting a vote? Don't answer yet. Hold the tension. In the silence between these questions, feel the shape of your life shifting. The walls aren't solid. They're made of metaphor, and metaphors can be rewritten. You've spent years believing language is neutral, a bridge between your mind and the world. But what if it's a cage? One forged not by some sinister outside force, but by you. Not with malice, but with the quiet complicity of every unexamined word. The problem isn't that language shapes reality. The problem is how it does so, and why you've been conditioned to forget its power. Let's begin in the shadows. Carl Jung warned of the collective unconscious, the subterranean river of symbols, myths, and archetypes that predate and predetermine human thought. You swim in these waters daily. When you call a setback a failure, you're not choosing a word. You're resurrecting a centuries-old narrative of sin and punishment. When you label grief depression, you're invoking Freud's melancholia and the Industrial Revolution's obsession with productivity. These aren't definitions. They're inheritances. And they're heavy. Friedrich Nietzsche saw it first. Language is a cemetery. Every word a tombstone for a dead metaphor. Lightning once meant the fury of Zeus. Inspiration meant divine breath. Now they're stripped of myth, reduced to tools for tax reports and small talk. But the ghosts remain. When you say, "I'm burned out," you're not describing exhaustion. You're unconsciously invoking Prometheus, chained to a rock for stealing fire, a metaphor that pathologizes ambition as rebellion. Your vocabulary is haunted. Why does this matter? Because hauntings have consequences. Arthur Schopenhauer argued that words don't just describe desires, they invent them. The moment a child learns the word mine, possession becomes possible. The moment a culture coins FOMO, it creates an anxiety that never existed before. Language doesn't reflect your world. It generates it. And here's the trap. The more sophisticated your vocabulary, the more refined your prison. You've been taught to articulate your suffering with clinical precision. Anxiety disorder, toxic relationship, existential dread. As if labeling the bars makes the cage less real. But who benefits from this illusion? Enter Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Not the dystopia of censorship, but the subtler horror. A society pacified by pleasure, numbed by slogans. Everybody's happy now. A gram is better than a damn. You live in the sequel. Your scripts are written by advertisers? Just do it. Influencers, live your truth. And algorithms that feed you phrases like self-care until the term becomes a burlesque of consumerism. These aren't words. They're neural implants. Repeat them enough, and they replace your inner voice. Jean-Paul Sartre called this bad faith, the act of surrendering your freedom to predefined roles. The waiter who becomes a waiter. The mother who dissolves into a mother. The addict who accepts, "I am an addict," as destiny. Nouns are the deadliest words. Turn a verb, to struggle, into a noun, a struggler. And suddenly a process becomes an identity, a cage. Yet the deepest roots lie further east. Lao Tzu, founder of Taoism, wrote, "The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao." Translation: the moment you label reality, you fracture it. Western philosophy obsesses over definitions. What is love? What is justice? While Taoism whispers, to define is to destroy. When you call your anger toxic, you split yourself into judge and prisoner. When you diagnose your restlessness as ADHD, you conflate a galaxy of human experience with a pharmaceutical manual. Language isn't clarifying your reality, it's colonizing it. And here we arrive at the wound. You've confused the menu for the meal. Neurologically, this isn't metaphor. fMRI scans show that hearing the word pain activates the same regions as physical injury. The term social rejection triggers a primal panic akin to starvation. Your brain doesn't distinguish between linguistic constructs and material threats. Can't. Evolution hardwired you to treat words as survival cues, a holdover from when growls and screams meant predators in the dark. Now, the growls are podcasts. The screams are comment sections. And your body remains on high alert, marinating in cortisol, because your boss emailed, "We need to talk." The psychological toll is fractal. Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, wrote that the greatest human freedom is the space between stimulus and response. But what if that space is saturated with language you didn't choose? When you automatically call a challenge overwhelming or a desire selfish, you're not choosing a response. You're reciting a script. The tragedy? These scripts were written by ancestors who feared wolves, by churches that worshipped guilt, by corporations that profit from your inadequacy. You speak in eulogies for freedoms you've never tasted. So why haven't you noticed? Because the cage is invisible by design. Schools teach grammar, not grammary, the medieval term for magic. You analyze metaphors in poetry but miss them in your self-talk. You've been trained to treat language as a utility, not a force. And forces you don't respect will always rule you. But there's a crack in the wall. Every time you gasp at a lyric, ache at a novel's ending, or feel a stranger's, "I understand," heal a wound logic couldn't touch, you brush against the truth. Words are alive. They carry the weight of dead generations and unborn possibilities. The question isn't whether they control reality, but which reality they're controlling, and who the puppeteer is. The answer will cost you. To see the strings, you must confront the darkest paradox. You're both prisoner and jailer, architect and inhabitant. The next layer of this labyrinth goes deeper, into how your silent agreements with language have sculpted everything from your memories to your democracy. But first, you must stand very still and listen to the words you're about to swallow. You walk through life believing you're the author. But what if you're the manuscript? Every word you've ever absorbed, from childhood nicknames to news headlines, has etched itself into your nervous system, rewiring your instincts, curating your fears. This isn't metaphor, it's biology. Cognitive scientists call it linguistic relativity, the way language molds perception. But this isn't some academic curiosity. It's a silent coup, a colonization of your inner world so complete you mistake the prison walls for sky. Let's dissect the carnage. Cognitive biases, the invisible architects. Consider the framing effect. A surgeon says a procedure has a 90% survival rate, and you consent. If she says it has a 10% mortality rate, you refuse. Same odds, different words, different realities. Now extrapolate this to how you frame your life. I'm learning versus I'm failing. Exploring versus lost. The facts don't change. The prison does. Or the anchoring bias. The first word you use to describe an experience becomes a psychological trap. Call a breakup devastating. And every memory calcifies around that anchor. Your brain cherry-picks evidence to sustain the narrative, deleting moments of relief, of growth. You become a historian editing your own biography to prove a thesis written in haste. But the deadliest bias is confirmation. The more you declare, nothing ever works out, the more your brain scans reality for proof. Missed trains, rejected pitches, lukewarm coffee, all become hieroglyphs in your temple of doom. Language isn't just describing your fate, it's drafting it. Neurological sabotage, words as neurotoxins. fMRI studies reveal that hearing the word no for less than a second triggers a cascade of stress hormones. Chronic negativity doesn't just bring you down, it shrivels your hippocampus, the brain region responsible for memory and resilience. Meanwhile, the term love releases oxytocin as reliably as a hug. Your vocabulary isn't commentary, it's chemistry. Even more insidious, self-talk. When you mutter, "I'm such an idiot," your amygdala processes it as a threat, identical to a tiger in the brush. Fight or flight responses engage. Cortisol floods. Prefrontal cortex functions. Reason, creativity, dim. Over time, this shapes your neural pathways. Literally, the brain regions governing self-awareness and empathy atrophy from disuse, while those fueling anxiety and aggression hypertrophy. You're not venting. You're performing DIY lobotomies. Cultural hypnosis. The myths you mistake for air. Language doesn't just transmit culture. It bakes it into your synapses. Ancient Greek had 4 words for love: eros, passion; philia, friendship; storge, family; agape, divine. Modern English has 1. What happens to a society that conflates all love under a single bankrupted term? You swipe through Tinder seeking agape, settle for storge, and call it eros. The poverty of your language becomes the poverty of your relationships. Now scale this. The Nazis didn't start with gas chambers. They started with words: Lugenpress asterisk, lying press, Untermensch, subhuman, Endlosung, final solution. These weren't labels. They were cognitive landmines. By changing vocabulary, they altered what was Thinkable. A lesson every dictator knows. Control language and you control the boundaries of empathy. You think you're immune? Your culture weaponizes euphemisms. Collateral damage sanitizes corpses. Downsizing masks ruin. Content creator dehumanizes artists. Each phrase anesthetizes moral response. You scroll past genocides described as conflicts, watch climates collapse under the term change, and wonder why you feel numb. It's not apathy. It's linguistic anesthesia, the personal apocalypse. Here's where it turns intimate. Every time you say, "I'm bad at relationships," you're not predicting the future. You're programming it. Your brain, eager to align actions with identity, will sabotage connections to maintain coherence. When you label social anxiety shyness, you reduce a galaxy of trauma and longing to a nursery rhyme. The words stick. The truth suffocates. Even your memories aren't safe. Elizabeth Loftus studies prove that the words used to question someone about an event can alter their actual recollection. Ask, "Did you see the broken headlight?" versus, "Did you see a broken headlight?" And witnesses remember details that never existed. Now ask yourself, how many of your cherished memories are fabrications? Shaped by parents' anecdotes, therapists' prompts, the stories you've told yourself until fiction ossifies into fact? You're not recalling your life. You're rewriting it. The ticking clock. This isn't academic. It's urgent. Each day you spend calling your anger issues, your genius arrogance, your joy guilty pleasure. You're etching these lies into your body. Muscle memory forms. Synapses harden. The philosopher J.L. Austin called language performative, utterances that act, not describe. When you say, "I'm tired," you're not reporting a state. You're commanding it. Cells obey. The consequences are fractal. On a societal scale, dead metaphors like war on drugs and climate skepticism have fueled genocides and extinctions. Personally, the phrase midlife crisis has doomed millions to manufacture despair at 45, while retirement sentences others to obsolescence at 65. These aren't stages of life. They're linguistic caskets. But the greatest casualty is agency. When you accept human nature as an explanation for greed, boys will be boys as exoneration for violence, or that's just how I am as life sentence, you're surrendering to linguistic determinism. You become a character in a story someone else is writing. A story where revolution is unrealistic, transcendence is naive, and the human spirit is a footnote, the threshold. There's a reason this feels like awakening in a hall of mirrors. Language has been your oxygen, your compass, your God. To question it is to risk ontological asphyxiation. But in the static between words, in the gasp before a scream, the pause after a lie, you glimpse the truth. Reality is waiting, naked, unnamed. The exit won't be found in better words, but in breaking them, in the spaces where language fails, where poetry begins. But first, you must map the labyrinth. You stand at the edge of a linguistic precipice. The words that once bound you now tremble, sensing your awakening. To rebel is not to swap chains for wings. It's to realize you were never truly grounded. The cage was made of air. Your first act of defiance? To speak as if language is a choice, not a commandment. History's greatest revolutionaries weren't warriors with swords, but heretics with tongues. Consider the French surrealists, who weaponized automatic writing, spilling raw, unfiltered thought onto pages to bypass societal conditioning. Or Hannah Arendt, who dissected the phrase banality of evil to expose how bureaucratic language enabled genocide. Even Nietzsche, declaring God is dead, wasn't killing a deity but murdering the word God, a linguistic idol that had outlived its meaning. These weren't thinkers, they were linguistic arsonists, but their rebellion pales beside what's possible for you. Step 1. Become a syntax saboteur. Language's tyranny thrives on certainty. Nouns, labels, definitions. To break free, you must resurrect the primal fluidity of verbs. When you say, "I am anxious," you fossilize a fleeting state into identity. Try instead, I experience anxiety. Suddenly, it's a weather pattern, not your climate. Lao Tzu's Taoist wisdom resurfaces. The flame that burns twice as bright burns half as long. Nouns are flames. Verbs are the fire. This is more than semantics, it's neurological warfare. fMRI studies show that describing emotions as transient, I feel angry, rather than absolute, I am angry, reduces amygdala activation. You're not lying. You're liberating. Step 2. Rewild your vocabulary. Every culture domesticates language into pastures of predictability. Slang, jargon, cliches, these are fences. Tear them down. In the Amazon, the Piraha tribe has no word for war. The Inuit have dozens of words for ice. What realities might you unlock by coining terms for the unnamed? Try it. Invent a word for asterisk, the joy of watching someone finally understand you. For the grief of outgrowing your past self. For the rage that tastes like mourning. This is how poets survive dictatorships. When Václav Havel confronted Czechoslovakia's regime, he didn't rally crowds with facts. He resurrected forbidden words. Truth, dignity, conscience. The state, fluent only in propaganda, had no defense. Step 3. Embrace taboo silence. The Zen masters were right. The truth cannot be spoken, but it cannot be unspoken either. Sometimes rebellion means refusing to participate. When a friend gossips, don't nod. Stay silent. Watch how the unspoken accusation withers. When advertisers scream you're incomplete, don't rebut. Let their words collapse in the vacuum. Viktor Frankl's logotherapy hinges on this. Between stimulus and response, there's a gap. Widened by silence. Filled by choice. But there's a darker art here. In 1984, Orwell's Newspeak aimed to erase rebellious thoughts by erasing words. Your countermove? Think the unthinkable. When language fails, think in sensations, in colors, in the hum of your cells. These are the places propaganda cannot reach. Step 4. Reclaim your origin story. Every identity is a myth. The question is, who holds the pen? Take the word trauma. Freud framed it as a life sentence, but psychologist James Hillman reimagined it as soul-making, a catalyst for depth. Similarly, the LGBTQ+ community hijacked queer from a slur to a banner. This is alchemy, taking leaden labels and transmuting them into gold. Your turn. Rewrite your lexicon. Replace failure with feedback. A Tesla engineer's mantra: crash test, iterate, repeat, swap obsession for devotion. Van Gogh didn't obsess over stars. He communed with them. Exchange guilt for accountability. Guilt paralyzes. Accountability mobilizes. These aren't affirmations. They're semantic coups. Step 5. Speak in paradox. To shatter logic's grip, wield the weapon that dismantled Zen students' egos. Koans. When asked, what is the sound of one hand clapping? The mind short-circuits. Dogma dissolves. Try your own. I am everything I've lost and everything I've yet to become. My weakness is my ancestors' strength. To control nothing is to command everything. Paradox isn't confusion. It's cognitive LSD. It forces your brain off well-trodden paths into uncharted wilderness. Carl Jung called this the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to hold opposites and birth new truths. The ultimate rebellion: betray your native tongue. The most radical act: to unlearn your mother language. Not linguistically, but existentially. When Eva Hoffman emigrated from Poland to Canada, she wrote, "I am trapped inside a language that doesn't fit." So she invented a new one. You must do the same. Start small. Write a letter to your younger self using only metaphor. Argue with your reflection in a language you don't speak. Describe your grief as a color, your joy as a texture, your rage as a symphony. This isn't play. It's exorcism. The price of freedom. Beware, to rebel is to court madness. When Nietzsche declared, "I am dynamite," he wasn't boasting. He was warning. Shattering linguistic chains risks destabilizing your worldview's foundation. Relationships may crumble. Careers may capsize. You'll taste moments of terrifying clarity where old certainties evaporate. But this is the baptism required. Remember, The poets, prophets, and philosophers who shaped history were often deemed lunatics. Why? Because they spoke truths that could not be contained by existing words. They didn't find their voice. They incinerated their silence. Your invitation, the rebellion begins now, not with grand proclamations, but with microscopic acts of linguistic treason. The next time someone asks, "How are you?" answer with a sound, not a word. Replace "I can't" with "I won't," and feel the shift from helplessness to power. Write your obituary, then burn it. Write it again. Language built your prison. Let it build your ladder. But remember, this isn't about optimism. It's about alchemy. You're not polishing the cage's bars. You're melting them down to forge keys. The final truth? There are no keys. There's only the falling, and the decision to call it flight. You stand at the edge of the known world. Behind you, the labyrinth of language. Its walls etched with every story you've ever told yourself. Ahead, a cliff. Beyond it, nothing. No words. No metaphors. Only a silence so vast it hums. This is where you must leap. The ultimate truth is not that words control your reality. It's that you've mistaken the menu for the meal, the map for the territory, the scream for the fire. Words are not your masters. They are the echoes of a deeper, wordless truth. One that existed before tongues formed syllables, before civilizations carved alphabets into bone. Let it unravel. The illusion of separation. Every word is an act of violence. To say tree is to sever roots from soil, leaves from sky, growth from time. To say self is to amputate your body from the earth that feeds it, your mind from the ancestors who dreamt it. Language fractures the seamless whole of existence into fragments. Then, like a child with a puzzle, you spend your life trying to force the pieces to fit. But the puzzle is rigged. Lao Tzu knew this. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. Rumi felt it. Silence is the language of God. All else is poor translation. Even quantum physics whispers it. At the subatomic level, there are no things, only relationships, probabilities, dances of energy. The moment you label a particle's spin up or down, you collapse infinite possibilities into a single lie. You've done the same with your life. The cosmic irony. Here's the joke. The more desperately you try to name your truth, the further you stray from it. When you say, "I love you," you reduce supernovas of feeling to a nursery rhyme. When you call grief depression, you shrink a sacred dialogue with mortality into a DSM code. Language is the original sin, not because it reveals, but because it conceals. Nietzsche glimpsed this when he wrote, "We have to cease to think if we refuse to do it in the prison house of language." But he missed the escape hatch. You don't have to think at all. The unthinkable truth. Close your eyes. Remember the last time words failed you. When a sunset left you mute. When a loss tore through you like a wildfire, reducing your vocabulary to ash. In that raw, wordless ache, that was reality. Unglossed. Untranslated. This is the secret the mystics died for. Reality exists in the interstices between words. In the pause between I and am. In the breath before yes. In the silence after why. The Japanese call this ma, the negative space that gives form to art. The Buddhists call it sunyata, emptiness pregnant with potential. You felt it in the ache of a forgotten dream, the hush before dawn, the weight of a glance that carries lifetimes. These are not metaphors. They are portals. The death of the storyteller. Your entire identity is a narrative. A cobbled-together epic of triumphs, traumas, and trivia you've mistaken for scripture. But what if you are not the author or even the protagonist? What if you are the page? Neurology confirms this. Your brain doesn't store memories. It reconstructs them. Each recollection rewrites the past. Your childhood home, your first kiss, your father's laugh. All are palimpsests, endlessly edited by the present. You think you're writing your story. You're being written. But here's the revolution. You can stop reading. When Viktor Frankl stood naked before Auschwitz's gates, he realized, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. What he didn't say, what he couldn't say, is that even attitude is a linguistic trap. The true freedom is to disidentify, to watch the story of you unfold without believing you're in it. The final paradox. Language built the cage. Language will dismantle it, but only if you wield it as a suicide bomb. When the Buddha said, all phenomena are preceded by the mind, led by the mind, made by the mind, he wasn't preaching positivity. He was revealing that mind itself is a linguistic construct. The moment you stop calling it mind, the moment you stop calling yourself, the game ends. This is why all profound truths sound like contradictions. To speak the truth, you must lie. To find yourself, you must disappear. To control reality, you must surrender. The unspeakable ritual. Let's perform heresy. Take your most sacred story, the one that begins I am, and burn it. Not metaphorically. Actually, write it down. Set it aflame. Watch as I am unlovable or I am destined for greatness curls into smoke. What remains? Not nothing. Everything. The Zen archer knows this. To hit the target, you must forget the bow. The poet knows this. To write the poem, you must become the blank page. You've always known this, too. In the moments when joy left you speechless, when rage tore language from your throat, when love dissolved you into something primordial. The last word. There is no last word. But if there were, it would taste like this. A child points to the moon. The fool stares at the finger. The wise man bites the child's hand. You are not the child, not the fool, not the wise man. You are the moon, always. Even when clouds of language obscure you, the silence that follows is not an absence. It's an invitation. The words have done their work. Now it's your turn.